This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds.
I have a dream.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have a liftoff.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Two Doomed Men podcast. It is Skaggs here, and I am joined, as always, by my right-hand man, El Capitan. And we
What's
have
up, everybody.
What's up? What's up? That's all right. That's all right. We're mixing it up a little bit today because Captain did a little work, and he got a guest that he was really interested in talking to. So I'll let you do what I normally do. We'll flip the roles here, and you can introduce him. Go for it.
Yes, today we have on Texas attorney Ken Good. How are you doing today, Ken?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for reaching out to us. And I mean, I had to be interested in you just off the bat because you don't every day you get tons of emails, but when you see subway poop attack in the headline of the email, it really, it grabs your attention pretty quickly. So I knew this was going to be interesting. This was going to be good. And I'm familiar with the story that you wanted to talk about. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Ken?
Well, I'm an attorney in Texas. I specialize in bail law, and bail is an important issue in not only Texas but across the country right now because we've seen this push for bail reform for probably 5 or 6, 7 years, and now we're seeing the fruits of it. We're seeing crime increase across the country, and so as we release more criminals, it seems like 1 + 1 = 2. You would think that equals more crime, but we've been told for 5 or 6 or 7 years, oh, that's not true. That'll actually make us safer. And now we know for a fact that that's not true.
Correct. Pointing out these, the woke ideologies of now bail reform and the justice system.
Yeah, so it's interesting you reached out to us using that story that Chris was mentioning, because I actually used to work right there. I've mentioned it a couple times on previous episodes, but this attack, I guess you'd say, on the New York City subway system was in the Bronx. I'm from the Bronx. It was on White Plains Road in the Bronx. I used to live right there. I know the neighborhood. It's not a great neighborhood. There's good people that live there, but obviously it's a little bit of like a low-income area, has a lot of crime, and things have gotten worse the past couple of years. Just a personal story. I was working there during the George Floyd riots, and people had attacked the store that I was working in, smashed up the front, etc. So it really is an unfortunate situation. There was a lot of good people that live in that area. If you want to watch it real quick, I do have, just because you sent this to us, I do have the video and the little story just to give everybody a little bit of context.
Sure.
Let's go for it.
In the Bronx tonight, a search for a suspect in an attack that can only be described as disgusting. That attack happened at a subway station. The man threw feces on a woman who was waiting for a train and then took off. That horrified victim today talked to Eyewitness News reporter Stefan Kim.
It is an attack on the subway, so vile, so disgusting. There are a few words to describe the indecency. In this video released by the NYPD, you can see a man take something out of a bag. That's something, human feces, which he then throws and rubs on a woman's face. No apparent motive. That woman says she was attacked out of nowhere. Speaking in Spanish, the victim, who did not want to be identified, says her assailant spread it all over her face and into her hair. She says she was sitting on a bench on her phone when she was struck. It happened so quickly. She didn't realize what had happened until after he fled. Police say it happened last Monday, February 21st, around 5:15 p.m. on the southbound platform of the East 241st Street subway station in the Bronx. The victim says 2 days after she was attacked here, she was harassed and followed by another man on the train in Brooklyn. In that incident, she said other riders were on board to help keep her safe. The mayor today saying incidents like this reinforce the need for a focus on how to address mental illness. And a week after his subway safety plan went into effect, he's ready to make some tweaks.
I am sitting down tomorrow to do an evaluation. I went out yesterday, some of the subway stations, and talked to the officers on the ground to ask them their pros and cons. What could we be doing differently?
As for the victim in the Bronx, she's hoping the mayor's plan to curb crime on the subway will work.
So, this is I've taken the subway many years of my life. I used to work in Manhattan. This is one of the more heinous crimes I've ever seen occur.
But, it's kind of a sign of other things going on across the country. It's this no fear.
Yeah.
I mean, and I noticed that, the mayor kind of offhand just blames it on mental illness. I mean, I think that probably explains some of it, but I mean, you live there, you used to live there, but so, I mean, what do you would identify? I mean, this concept that there's just no fear. I mean, I mean, we would have never thought about doing something like this, but I mean, as a society, a person would usually have fear of consequences for doing it, but we're kind of in this period where there's no fear of criminal justice system at all.
I think there's something to what you're saying, just because of the fact that it is a pretty heinous crime. And I got to be honest, it's funny, but it's not. It seems like people are doing a lot, especially in New York City. They're doing a lot of just pointless crimes, right? Like,
Yeah,
what is
because they get away with it?
What is the point of taking poop and smashing it into some poor woman's face who's sitting there? I don't know. Maybe because you think you're going to go viral, and people are going to talk about it on a podcast. It really is just mindless, just crime. Maybe you're right that it's just there is no fear. One of the things I want to mention about the coverage here from NBC, I think it was, or it was Eyewitness News. I mean, they don't mention anything about the guy's history. You wrote it in your email to us in the article. I mean, he, I believe, had something like 44 previous things on his record. And if you want to get into the bail reform, he was essentially just, revolving door, in and out.
Yep.
Well, we have a state senator, John Whitmire, Texas, who likes to say we need to put the people that we're scared of in jail, not the people we're mad at. And, what I keep telling him is, all these people, this guy's an example of that. He's hearing those comments and he's saying, well, you know what? I'm going to make it into a game. I'm going to see how mad I can make you without going to jail. I mean, there's no other explanation. They've made it into a game almost.
Definitely they have. You want to go into and explain a little bit of bail reform and why this is taking place?
Sure. I kind of take a different tack on why this is taking place. I think, this is really coming from our urban areas on how we process large numbers of people through the jail quickly and efficiently. And that's really the question or the problem that nobody can solve. Historically, like in Houston, the third largest county in the country, that processes 1,000 people a week through the jail for misdemeanor arrest. They used to use a bail schedule. They got sued for that. They didn't have proper procedures. And so they actually won the case on appeal, but nobody knows that. In the settlement, they threw out that. They've replaced it with what New York is currently doing. It's just simple release for certain crimes or release with no bond in New York. But it's the same thing. It's simple release. And that's just been an abject failure. I mean, it just is a revolving door. People, you get people on the courthouse steps that are criminals going, oh, I love bail reform. It's great. And y'all have ads going on in New York right now where people are saying, please don't change bail reform. I'm like, let's get the people that are really saying that. Let's get the career criminals, the gang members. Let's see organized crime in front of cameras saying, please don't change bail reform. You'll get it changed. But the problem is all these different proposals are really how to process large groups of people through the jail quickly and efficiently. Simple release doesn't work, and there's nothing really to replace it with except individual magistration or go back to bail schedule. Individual magistration in the urban areas is really, really expensive, and we just can't afford to spend all of our criminal justice dollars on that. And so we have to look for alternatives to divert people away from magistration so we have the time to spend on the truly poor people, the time to have discretion to exercise it when it's needed. What we're doing right now is creating chaos. And the chaos is what's causing these problems with the revolving door because judges don't have the time to differentiate one person from the next. And so it's leading to this system where we want to protect the poor, so we end up tying the hands of the judges. So they don't have the discretion to identify career criminals, gang members, or organized crime and do what the criminal justice system needs to do with those people. Instead, we tie their hands and we get the revolving door, we get crime going up, and we see criminals see this as a green light to commit more crime. And it's going to continue until we reverse what we're doing, where we go back and add accountability. And when you get this guy that thinks it's just a game where he can do acts like this, and this lady who was a victim, who says the very next day she's followed around and harassed by people in the same place. where crime in the underbelly, the underground is just skyrocketing. Even when they're doing a crackdown, crime has continued to increase. It's just crazy.
I have a question. So how come there is no differentiating between criminals? Because we have friends that and family that are police officers. We had a friend who arrested a man who stabbed a woman a couple of dozen times, and that man was released 24 hours later. That's clearly a vicious, violent, very violent crime. Why is he getting out after 24 hours, whereas the people who are showing up at the malls doing the smash and grabs at the high-end stores, I could see that as wrong as that is, maybe it's not, it's not violent. No one's really getting hurt. A lot of that stuff's insured, but you stab someone 20 times, you're out 24 hours later.
Well, I think both of those are examples of crimes that are really hurting our cities. The first one, though, I think that is the focus of the debate right now in New York on whether a judge has the discretion to consider dangerousness in setting bail. And the people that originally authored the bail reform bills, they've kind of, put their flag in the ground at that and said they're not going to give in with that. Now we have the budget past due because that's what they can't agree on. And I guess also a new stadium for the Buffalo Bills. But I would even say, I think the smash and grabs are just as dangerous. And the reason why is because you got social media, you got organized crime or criminals rounding up gangs of groups of people to go do a smash and grab. And, when we say, oh, it's insured, well, that's the mentality that's got us to where all these stores like Walgreens and I think Rite Aid in New York, they're closing because they can't afford $25,000 a day in shoplifting. I mean, they can't get insurance for that. They can't raise prices high enough to cover all that. And who does that hurt? It hurts the people, the tax-paying people. They don't have services. And also it hurts the taxpayer base, the politicians on their ability to actually help the poor because they don't have the taxes. So they're going to have to raise taxes even higher than they already are.
Yeah, I'd also comment, just being a libertarian, like I believe in private property rights. Just because something's insured or just because who cares if Amazon gets robbed? No, you have to have a set of private property rights and you have to follow that in order to have like a functioning society. So just, we can't just allow people to just go and smash and grab and organize it. Going back to my, I know you're not. I'm just saying.
I know the rules are different there, but in Texas we have the castle doctrine. So if you imagine the policies of, it's just insured. So we take certain crimes and we're no longer going to prosecute them like in California. But in Texas, we have the castle doctrine. So you break into my house and you steal my TV. I have the right to defend my castle, my house, and I can kill you. I can use force to kill you to defend my house. That's not true in every other state.
Not in New York.
I can do that in Texas. So you're committing a crime that you might not be prosecuted for. I can kill you and I will get no bail at the grand jury. Is that really where we want society to be? I don't think so.
No, I mean, I think that's a useful tool of deterrence, but nobody wants to kill someone in their home for breaking in. I'd rather no one break into my home.
But I don't. But I also want, if the government's not going to be able to protect me, I want them to allow me to have the resources, even if it means owning a gun, so that I can protect myself.
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. Me and Chris are two of the biggest Second Amendment supporters that exist on the face of the earth. It's New York is a crazy place. We were talking to Larry Sharp, who's running for governor of New York State, and we don't even have laws that make sense over how many bullets can be in the gun.
Yeah, there's laws in New York, like Larry was saying, like if Skaggs was outside getting beat up by some criminal with a baseball bat and I used my gun to stop him, we both get arrested. If I see the guy coming at him with the bat and I pull my gun to stop him, I just get arrested and no one else gets arrested. You're not even allowed to defend yourself in this state, but yet you could do wild.
That wasn't the rule very long ago in New York. I mean, that's really just been a process of the last 8 to 10 years, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They've been chipping away little by little over here. And it brings up the gun debate and the argument that, so I can't even help someone from being robbed without getting arrested in this state. So then when somebody's getting, poop smeared all over them if you were allowed to defend yourself in this state, you might think twice about doing something as stupid as that to someone else. There was a while back, one of the more disturbing videos I saw was it was in Midtown Manhattan, I believe, and it was an ATM bank, and this guy was getting money out of the ATM, and this guy came in, and he didn't come in to rob him. He just came in to attack him with a hatchet. It was a vicious, brutal attack, extremely scary, violent stuff. But you got to think, this criminal knows this guy's not packing. There's no one in here that's going to defend him. This is free reign. We get to do as we want and walk away scot-free afterwards.
Was it 20 years ago? There was a situation where a guy was carrying a gun on a subway, and someone approached him and he pulled out his gun and he killed him and went all the way to trial. And the jury found him not guilty. And imagine that today. I mean, it's almost unthinkable that could happen today in New York.
Yeah.
In New York, forget it. Yeah, you can be getting robbed, as I've seen, and in your business, and you are at gunpoint, and then you might have a gun, because that's one of the few situations you're legally allowed to own a gun if you're a business owner. And then you shoot the person who's robbing your store, and you will be arrested and processed. I mean, At the end of the day, you'll probably be all right because you were defending yourself still, but you'll still be arrested and put through the system.
I bet you they'll put bail on you.
Yeah, probably, right? That's what I want to get back to, man. I mean, I do think that there's some room for, obviously, bail reform with common sense, of course. I think what this has done, Ken, and maybe you could talk to this more, is it's kind of jaded some of the judges, where they feel like, all right, well, you don't want to let us be able to make decisions, then so be it. And things have kind of just gone a little bit crazy, at least in the New York area.
I'm kind of at the point where I don't even know if I agree that there are some bail reforms that we need, because it seems like that they use that as a toho. I mean, the best example I can use is New Jersey. They sold bail reform probably back in 2019 that we're going to amend the Constitution and we're going to give the judges more discretion to hold dangerous people in jail. The problem was what was passed and what was put up for vote when they passed it did the opposite. It turned setting bail into a mini trial, and the prosecution has to put on certain evidence within 4 days, and they can't be ready, and it ends up where the court has no discretion because it's just the judge, and it's the DA's burden of proof, and they have to do it by clear and convincing evidence, which is the highest level of proof before beyond a reasonable doubt. And so you've made it almost impossible to hold anybody in jail. And that's what you see now whenever you're talking about bail reform. When they say they want to do X, you have to look at it, you have to research it, because they usually are actually making it more difficult and tying the hands of judges to do anything whenever they're saying, well, we're just going to do these little bitty small steps. So I question any bail reform coming from the left right now, because the mentality is such that their intent they can't truly disclose, and they misrepresent what they're trying to do.
Fair enough. I mean, I agree with you 100% there. I question every single thing coming from the left right now. Definitely, of course. What do you think is the? Here's a question for you, right? Like sometimes me and Chris get into the conspiracy theories and whatnot, but what do you think is the intention, the goal behind this? Obviously, it hasn't worked. That's exactly
what I was going to ask.
I figured you would. I kind of stole your thunder there, but
no, it's all good.
Why?
Go for it.
The why? Why is this happening? Why have they pushed these laws that obviously don't work, and they're not good for anybody, especially the communities that you see these, the Bronx, right? It ain't made things better in the Bronx.
No. And on top of telling everyone, oh no, these are working. All these policies are working great.
Well, I think it started out, and I've thought a lot about this, but I think this started out as rhetoric, and you would see it like 6 months before an election. We're kind of at the point. We're 8 months before election in November, so we're 2 months away from whatever it is they're going to do before this election cycle. So they would come up with some rhetoric to make their supporters angry and get them to come out and vote in larger numbers. And so I really think it just started out as, oh, y'all are being picked on. You need to get mad. You need to come out and vote in larger numbers. But then the problem is they weren't delivering on their promises. And so then they started looking for other people who were the true believers, who didn't care about consequences. They made the same promises. And then when they got into office, they were hell bent on fulfilling the promises. So I think you have some people in this coalition on the left that are true believers, and then you got some who are just wanting to create chaos. I think Soros, and he's pushing to elect DAs that have these reforms, and I would say activists, where they're just not following the law anymore. They're not enforcing the law. And you can see that where you've got recall actions going on in San Francisco and another push in LA. I think that you're just seeing that those people are pushing to create chaos. And I think you're seeing the consequences of that. I think the latest poll is in San Francisco. That DA is like 60 to 70% people wanting to recall her, that DA. And that needs to happen in more places.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I haven't heard good things out of San Francisco for a while now. I believe, speaking about poop, they have an app in San Francisco where you can track where people poop on the sidewalk. This way you don't step in it. Yeah. I mean,
well, and that's just, even those are other examples. California, all the things that California done, you just look at those and go, those are not smart policy decisions. I mean, you're setting up policy that's causing people to move away from the state. You're creating policy where if somebody wants to camp outside your business, you can't force them to move because of some statute they passed. And so you've created policies that are damaging to society, and you've done all these bond elections to raise money for housing, but then you're under court supervision for how ineffective and how the money has just been wasted. And you go, how do these people continue to get elected? And they do. They're a one-party state right now. Maybe that's in the middle of changing. I don't know.
I don't think so. If you want to talk about California, I think it's going to become even more hyper-partisan because most people are leaving that don't like this stuff, and the people who are staying are the people obviously who are going to probably support it. So, yeah.
Well, if you really want to talk about conspiracy theories, the one that I've heard the most recently that I like is that we need to investigate some of these environmental groups that don't want drilling and some of these groups that are pushing bail reform to see who's actually funding them. And some of the arguments are like for the environmental groups that maybe a lot of their funding is coming from Russia, who wants less drilling in the U.S. because it helps their market. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we got into that opaque system of who's contributing to these groups. We might find more of that than we really realize there is going on.
Yeah, I'm all for accountability and transparency.
Yeah.
I don't see what could possibly be bad about any of that.
Well, they'll fight for it regardless.
Well, I agree that I think there's a case from the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, it's less than 2 years old, that is not helpful. That makes it difficult to find out who the donors are to some of these groups.
So, how do you feel living in Texas? We were talking about how these piss poor policies are forcing people out of these states. And, this has been a topic that we've been talking about a lot lately. Everybody's fleeing New York. Everyone's fleeing California because crime is rising. But a lot of these people still come down there with the same mentality. Have you started to see a change in your state? Because I know in the last election, whether, whatever you believe upon, it was a close call for, between turning red and turning blue, almost like it was going to be a swing state or something.
Well, I think the latest polls or the research has shown that people coming from other states to Texas are predominantly voting red. So they're coming here with a new mentality and supporting Texas programs. How do I feel about living in Texas? With the exception of Houston and Harris County, I feel fortunate. The problem we have in Houston and in Harris County is, one of the commissioners invited a plaintiff's law firm, an activist group, to come in and sue Harris County over their bail practices. And so even though the county was winning the litigation, there was an election where they were like, oh, we're up in arms. We've spent $8 million on this litigation. We need to settle. And so all new judges were elected with the promise that they would settle. Well, now they've settled. They've thrown everything out. They've created a simple release system for most misdemeanor charges. And it's very much like New York. It's not working. They defend it as if it is working, even though the DA's issued a report now saying it's not. But they have a monitor that says it is. And all it is somebody hired by the county to defend what they're doing. And, as a result of what's going on in Harris County, the Texas legislature pushed for major bail reform that would not have passed but for Harris County being crazy. And so now we've got Harris County doing what they want. The case law that they relied upon for their settlement has now been reversed by the Fifth Circuit. And they're now not even in compliance with Texas law because it's changed. And they're just a land of their own, an island among themselves. They want to do whatever it is that they want to do because they have activists currently in charge. And but for them, I feel fortunate to be in a conservative state.
I think a lot of this has been spurred by activists, and a lot of them are bad faith actors. There was actually a story that came out the past couple of days about Black Lives Matter, and it was reported that they took a lot of the donation money they had and they spent it, I think it was like $9 million on a home somewhere in Southern California, I believe, or something like that, so they could shoot more activism videos and things like that in the house. There's a lot behind that. I do think that a lot of people in the Black Lives Matter movement do have good intentions, like people on the ground. But I think the leadership and whatnot, obviously, they don't have any of that actually.
Yeah. The problem I have with that whole situation is you just compare that to the January 6th situation and you get two completely different results.
Sure.
You've got, the protests from the summer 2 years ago, and you've got, none of them need to be arrested. They can't be charged. And they did absolute destruction.
Murder.
The business.
Murder.
33 people died. Yeah.
Destroyed tax bases. And then you've got what happened on January 6th. And I'm not saying that what happened January 6th was good. I'm just saying, look at the disparity in treatment. You've got people being held in solitary confinement and for no reason, for they would not be held in jail. I mean, it's like they're being held hostage to plead guilty. And that's the exact opposite of all these bail reform things that we've been talking about for year after year after year.
Yeah.
And so the disparity or the difference in the way those two groups are being treated tells me there's not good faith.
Sure,
and
of course.
As long as it becomes across like we are punishing our political enemies.
That's very well put. How do they get away with, so everybody talks, the bail reform, it's working, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure the answer is going to be pretty more obvious, but like, how do they get away with just excluding the January 6 people where everyone else, people committing acts of murder on January 6 in a different state are out, no bail, but grandma trespassing on, the steps of Congress, solitary confinement, maximum security. How, like, where's the justice if this bail reform works so well?
The scales of justice are supposed to be blind, correct?
Yeah, that's a good point. The scales of justice are supposed to be blind. And we have statues of Lady Justice, and she has a blindfold. And the symbolism of that is we're in our court system, we're colorblind. And, everybody has grievances about our criminal justice system. And my response is, look, we have the best criminal justice system in the world. You may not think it's the fairest, but it is the fairest in the world because we have this thing we call the Constitution that, and you know what? In Texas, we have a Constitution that says you have a constitutional right to surety bail, which is the private industry. You don't have a constitutional right to just be released. You don't have a constitutional right to a PR bond. You have a constitutional right to a surety bond. And that dates all the way back to the Magna Carta, where the King of England was agreed to limits being placed on his ability. And one of the limits that was placed on his previous rights was to just put people in jail and hold them forever until he got around to trying the trumped up charges against them. And we put restrictions, and it was to that. People had a right to release, and it's encased in our Constitution, and that is the right to surety bail, the private industry bond, a bond. And you could argue that the limitations and the restrictions and the reforms that we're using to get rid of that or to limit that is actually setting the seeds for future chaos, because we'll take away a fundamental right of our Constitution, and it will take away something that is an industry that's been around for over 200 years. And I don't think that's not a possible reality.
Yeah, so I'm of the opinion. Obviously, I'm a big believer in the Constitution for every amendment and rights, and having something written down that we follow this, and that's how we get along in society. But it's just a piece of paper at the end of the day, essentially. And if people don't believe in it, it doesn't mean shit, in my opinion. It might mean something to me. It might mean something to the two of you. But if someone doesn't believe in the Constitution, it doesn't mean anything. And if people in charge, people in power, don't believe in it, it won't mean anything. So, maybe you could speak on this a little bit, but I feel like there has to be a cultural movement here to like reject violent crime and appreciate individual rights and liberty, because things are going the opposite way. So we could sit here and cry, well, we have our Second Amendment right and we have laws and things like that, but if nobody cares about those things, they don't mean shit. They're just pieces of paper up on the wall or whatever.
I read an article one time that said, a democracy relies upon the consent of the losers in an election to govern. And if you think about the last 2 or 3 election cycles, we have one side that if they lose, it was stolen. And if you win, you're illegitimate. You shouldn't have won. And now you could argue with January 6th that it's now on both sides. Either side that loses claims that they should have won.
Well, it's true. Yeah, in 2016 it happened, and now it happened again.
And the win was illegitimate. And every time that happens, I think about what I read, and I think that is so true. For a democracy to work, it relies upon the consent of the losers for the winners to govern. Because I mean, we've seen with Trump, and I think you can even go back to Obama. I think Rush Limbaugh was the first kind of person to come out and say, I hope you do really bad. And I thought that at the time, I think that shocked a lot of people. That wouldn't shock anybody today.
Right. That was nice.
That would be considered nice. I mean, remember when Obama had his State of the Union and somebody said, you lie, and how offended they were? He had to come out and apologize. And now we've got Pelosi tearing up a State of the Union address and just, essentially calling names. And you're just like, okay, well, what's next?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
I had a question. So we were talking about how, we need like a cultural movement to change this. So the bail agencies, the Rite Aids that are going out of business, these Rite Aids is no small business. I guess it's a franchise, but local business owners, like, why aren't they banding together to try and push through some change? Because, when we're talking about Rite Aid and Walgreens, those aren't small companies. There's dozens upon bail agencies out there with bounty hunters and stuff. There's a lot of people going out of work here. How come they're not getting together to fight this as well?
Well, I think they are. And I think if you can believe what's in the news now, and you can, kind of pick up little bits and pieces from political stories, you can see that there are seeds being planted, that there's going to be a big sea change in November at the election. And you can see it from the Democrats are scared to death of what's going to happen in November. I think you can see it in New York with the governor having her 10-point plan leaked. And I think, just a week before she was saying nothing about bail reform. And she was saying, it wasn't the cause of any increased crime. And so I don't think it was a mistake or an accident that suddenly she had a 10-point plan that was leaked that essentially repealed a lot of the bail reform that had been previously passed. And now you've got the authors of the bill freaking out and trying to draw a line in the sand saying we're not going to cross that. And now they're at an impasse. They can't even pass the budget by April the 1st. And I think you see parts of that across the country. You see President Biden suddenly saying we're the law and order party and we think you should hire more police. And I'm like, would you like to listen to yourself from just a month ago? And then you have parts of their own party saying we still believe in defunding the police. And so I think there is a huge backlash coming. And I'm going to even admit, I hope there is a big backlash coming because we need one. Mm-hmm. I've said for a couple of election cycles, when either party gets too far to the extreme, they need a big loss to bring them back to the middle. And I think that we are at the point where we need a big loss in November to bring one of our parties back to the center. Now, that may cause the other one to push a little bit to the extreme as well, but we've got to have that party come back to the center. And if we don't, the next time they come into power, they're just going to push further and further to the left. So we've got to have somebody pushing them back. And I'm expecting the voters to do that in November. I really am.
Oh, I hope so. Another thing that just came to my mind, eventually there's going to be a fine line to cross with this, with the backlash, because yes, right now things are just chaos and we're basically living out, we're days away from Mad Max and the Purge where there's just no laws. But when this backlash does come, how do we prevent from no law and order and chaos to a police state where the police now just have free reign to do whatever they want? Because we're going to get extra hard on crime, because it could go to the extreme the other way and you start getting busted for, jaywalking. And we're still not a happy medium.
Now we're living in Saudi Arabia or North Korea.
Well, you can see the seeds of that being planted as well, because the opposite extreme of that is preventative detention, where you don't have a right to release. And, we have in Texas, we had a proposed constitutional amendment to extend preventative detention, and it didn't get through the legislature. But the governor is saying that he's going to repropose that in the next session. So you can see that happening. But I agree. How do we keep that from happening? And I think part of it is we have to have some kind of moral code, or not even a moral code. We have to have some kind of standard we live by, and we need to live with it. I read a book, and the story is about someone who's tempted to cheat on doing something, and you have to have made your mind up before you get into that situation what your answer to be, and you have to be able to live with yourself. Now, I'm lucky. I grew up in a small town, a country hick, and I worked my way to become an attorney and to have the family that I have. But, I've been faced with decisions like that growing up. I've been faced in a situation where, you go off the deep end. And I've just been lucky. And sometimes I guess I say it's by the grace of God, because I could have gone the other way. But when I've been faced with those decisions, I've been like, no, that's not the person I want to be. That's not the person I want my wife to see. That's not the person I want my children to see. In fact, I'll tell you what has scared me the most with both of my children, because both of them did it. They've come to me at one point and said, you need to run for president, Dad. And what that's saying is you're the smartest person we know. And as a dad, there is nowhere you can go from that moment but down. But so you spend the rest of your life hoping to live up to the way your children thought of you for that brief moment. And I think we all need to be thinking outside of ourselves in those situations, because I think it's hard. I mean, we can talk about drugs getting people off track, and I understand we have a huge drug problem, and we've given up on the drug fight. We can't, when we say we're going to send them to treatment, no, we've given up. And drugs are the source of so many other crimes. If we give up completely on the drug trafficking and drug crimes, then we're giving up on crime completely. And so we have to continue to fight that. And if we're really only sending people in name only to get treatment, and we're never checking to see if they completed it, then we're just getting a cycle, the revolving door at the treatment place, and no wonder crime's going up. And so I don't know what the answer is, other than we've got to find a moral code that we live by, and we've got to teach people that we're better off as a group to do that.
Here's a question I've got for you. This is something we were actually talking about in our last episode. We were at the Libertarian Party Convention of Connecticut, and we were talking about the legalization of all drugs. And how the criminalization of all drugs has essentially created a black market, which empowers criminals. You could go back to, and we use the example of going back to the Prohibition and how it kind of empowered the mafia at the time and made them this gigantic criminal organization. And if you look now today, the narcos in Mexico, they are some of the wealthiest, well-equipped, outrageous organizations you'll ever see. I've seen videos of them. They have essentially military style equipment that they use, and it's all funded by drug purchases, right, and sales in the United States. So the Libertarian Party, and at least myself, I think it's worth considering a complete legalization of all drugs. And I want to hear your take. Maybe you'll have a different, different opinion on it, because you'll essentially take the power away from those criminal elements, and you'll give it into the hands of law-abiding citizens in order to sell it and do things responsibly. What are your thoughts on that as a possibility, or just the idea of that?
I saw an article recently, and I don't remember if it was Colorado or California, but I think it was, well, I don't know which it was, but they were, the point of the article was that people were going back to the black markets to buy marijuana because the regulations and the pricing had made it, they had outpriced
California
the market, and it was so much cheaper to go back to the black market. So, the argument that I hear for it is that we'll regulate it and price it out, and we'll have all these tax dollars. I don't see that happening.
Well, I don't agree with that.
I think the destruction that it brings to our society is too high. And I'm going to make a different argument that I hope you haven't heard before. And I think we have some people that are arguing for this because they think it will make our fellow citizens more docile, more compliant. And I don't want to do anything that does that.
I see what you mean.
Okay.
I see what you mean. I agree with you there. And it is funny that it seems like in certain places like California, they have regulated it and, taxed it to the point where it's cheaper to go buy weed from a drug dealer.
Yep.
I'm more of a free market principles guy. I think that would maybe be a better idea than just regulating the shit out of something. And this was something we were talking about in our last episode. I don't think we have to advocate that people go start doing heroin. If we were to legalize everything, we should have moral values which condemn and think that doing those things are wrong. But just, I don't know, this is just my personal belief. When the government gets involved in things.
I'm going to throw another argument out at you, and it's an argument that I heard from Europe one time where they were going to legalize prostitution. And the argument that finally stopped that was, well, you get fired from your job. You're a cute, beautiful woman, and you're on unemployment. And the local prostitute house offers you a job. And your moral code says, no, I can't do that. Well, you were offered a job if we legalize that, and you turned it down. So you're no longer eligible for unemployment. That's my concern when we start saying, oh, we're going to legalize this. Well, I mean, it plays into the hands of the people wanting to create chaos.
Yeah, I'd argue in that scenario, however, though, that they're using the unemployment over you as almost as like they're holding it over you, which they did recently, even with COVID and the mandates and whatnot. They essentially, either you're getting the jab or you're getting fired, and if you don't do it, you're shit out of luck. You're not getting your unemployment, and that's what
all coercion.
Right, coercion, essentially. Yeah, I don't know, Cap. You got any other thoughts?
My last thing really is, so Ken, how did you decide to get into starting to come on podcasts and talking about all this? What was, your breaking point, that made you say, like, I got to get my voice out there? Because, we scream it from every episode. People always ask, what can I do?
Sure.
Get out there, do something, start doing research, share that research, something, wake other people up.
Well, what we had happen was we had this federal lawsuit filed in Harris County, and we had all these supposed experts talking about bail reform and what worked and what didn't work. And it became very clear to me that nobody knew what the hell they were talking about. And I told, my people that I deal with, I said, we've got to become experts on this. We have to know this issue inside and out better than anyone, because no one else is. They're just spouting off crap, really. And you can see this where, we have the federal courts pushing individual magistration, which is very expensive. But then we have these consultants from California coming all through Texas saying, you know what, I can guarantee that you will not be sued if you just do what we tell you to do. And what do you know? We're recommending you adopt a risk assessment. Well, since then, it didn't keep anybody from being sued. And all the studies have come out saying risk assessment should not be a part of criminal justice reform. And the biggest digital companies in the world came out saying that they are good for predicting what groups will do, but terrible for predicting what individuals will do. And they also look at your racial background, so there's a racial element. And so now everyone says that you should not use risk assessments. And the Vera Institute came out and said, we're sorry that we ever supported them. And while we did push them in New Jersey, and they're still part of New Jersey, we now consider that a failed state for bail reform. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, y'all came up with this, you didn't test it, you pushed it, and now science caught up with you and said it was complete bunk. And think of all the millions and millions of dollars that were just wasted on this canard, this circle. And they've got a 200-year-old industry that has been getting people to court with the lowest failure to appear rate. Get your cases resolved quicker than anything. And they won't even ask what we think, what they should do, because it's all politics now. And so we started educating ourselves. We started holding ourselves out. I started writing articles. I've had numerous articles published on these issues at Attorney at Law Magazine, Lawyer Monthly, Law 360, other publications. And then once something happens, we highlight it and we try to get the word out. Like, the Fifth Circuit issued an opinion in January the 7th of this year, completely reversing the case in Harris County, and by name reversing it. I mean, the news stations in Harris County won't even report it. And so we're getting the news out that here's what, good bail reform looks like. Here's what a workable solution is, and just trying to become a resource. We have our website, pbtx.com. We have a blog there that highlights stories in the news. We have a lot of our blog paths. We've even started our own podcast where we can highlight issues of importance when they come up. And so we just became very active when we saw everything going off the rails.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah. Like I said, people are always saying, what can I do? I appreciate that, man. You guys saw something you don't like, and you've decided you're going to do something about it. Maybe me and you don't necessarily agree on every single principle. Sure. That's fine. There's room for sane people to have rational discussions here.
I'm so glad you said that, because I completely agree. We can have a disagreement and an intelligent discussion, a Lincoln Douglas style discussion. What really frustrates me is when I get up and give my presentation, and then the other side stands up and said, Ken Good's an idiot. You shouldn't listen to anything he says. And he's racist, even though he didn't say anything racist, but he's racist because he's arguing against me. So don't listen to him.
I mean, you presented that pretty nicely. Most of the time, they'll just scream at the top of their lungs, inaudible sounds, and it'll just be a disaster. Yeah, we deal with that too. But go ahead, Chris.
It's to the point now, we're past the point of trying to negotiate with logic and these people can't be reasoned with. So now like-minded people from across the country, like we are, who have something to bring to the table, come together and give these discussions. That's the way we're going to move forward.
Yeah, that's right. Because, and you know what? They're doing a disservice to themselves and to their party, because they have a whole generation of politicians now that don't know how to argue to defend their positions because they don't have to. They just call you an idiot. And because of your identity, their supporters are not supposed to listen to you. And all they have to say is that. And so they don't know how to defend their positions. And we're worse off as a society if we don't have a debate.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. We have to form some sort of alliance here. Libertarians, conservatives, Republicans, the few remaining rational liberals or classical liberals.
The moderate class.
Whoever.
And the bottom's going to fall out here because, we're in a cycle right now where we don't compromise. One party's in charge and they pass stuff, or they do it by executive order. The other party comes in, and the first year they spend the whole year undoing what the last party did. We've never had that before in our country until the last two parties in office. And that's really where we're going to be until the bottom falls out. That will not last long. The bottom will fall out of one party. And I'm hoping that it's going to fall out pretty hard in November for one party, because it needs to. It needs to for the health of our democracy.
I agree with that 100%.
Don't disagree.
All right.
Yeah. Any final words, Ken?
Well, no, I would just say thank y'all very much for letting me be on your show. I've enjoyed it very much. And I love your name, Two Doomed Men.
Yep. Thank you.
But hopefully with the information that you are giving out to your listeners, that we're not as doomed as your title.
Yes.
Well, we hope
That's
not.
the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal. To be less doomed, I guess you could say.
Yes.
Our flag logo is upside down. I'd hope in the future we could turn it right side up.
Yeah.
Again. That'd be nice.
I will say I do see promise. I do see hope. And you see this across the country when people are saying enough is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And you see recalls going in, and you see polls saying that they're going to be recalled by 60 or 70% in San Francisco. That would have been unheard of. And then you hear, thoughts that maybe this upcoming election has promise for our country and our society. And I think maybe the thing that may kind of turn it all around, maybe it's schools and how
I said that earlier.
Overreaching in our schools. And people get really upset about their children. And
don't mess with kids.
Yeah, I said this to Skaggs earlier. I said, this is just the one battle they're definitely not going to win. And it's impressive with everything that's gone on. At least a majority of people have found their backbone and found the hill they will die on. It's a start. I think it's hopeful. I think, you're completely correct. We're winning more than we're losing. It just doesn't seem like that because we're fighting an uphill battle in the middle of the fog of war. And I think when the dust settles, the bottom will fall out for one, and things will change. There is like a reckoning that is coming. Either we'll be living in the pods, eating the bugs, or we'll have some new utopia. I don't know.
Yeah, they want you to feel like you're alone and you're losing all the time, and you're not.
Well, I'm hoping it resets to a better place, and then we'll continue to push. But as long as we're the party of the extremes, or the two parties have extremes, and that's all we seem to be electing, we're going to have problems for a while.
Yeah.
But even right now, I mean, did you ever think we'd be living in a time where we're saying Nancy Pelosi is the moderate in her party? She's not the moderate. The fact that we're even considering calling her the moderate tells you how far out of whack their party is. And the fact that the news, I just want to know where did the news come off? The media believe that they have to defend those positions. Where did that happen?
No, they were told to.
And there's a reckoning. You can see it. I think the Hunter Biden laptop story is the start of the reckoning, because for some reason, 8 months before the November of the election, the major media has come out and decided that we need to get ahead of something, whatever it is. We need to get ahead of it and admit that the laptop is genuine. So something's going on. We don't know, but time will show. And I'm hoping it's the tip of the iceberg to right this ship.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. My last point is I thought the same thing back when that first originally broke. You said it was the tip of the iceberg or the beginning of something changing. I thought so too at the time, because that was like the first instance, I guess you could say, of like outright censorship that we saw, and I was railing against it at the time because I'm like, this is bad. This is only going to get worse, which it had. But if you look back on it, maybe at the end of the day, it was a good thing because you needed them to cross over the line. In order to expose themselves. Same thing with the teachers and the schools and whatnot.
Yeah.
They've gone too far, and there's going to be a reckoning. I agree. Definitely.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think the COVID showed us what bail reform on steroids looks like.
Yeah.
And it showed us what the future could hold, and not just temporarily. And it has been a very, very bad picture. And I think we've all starting to realize that.
I hope so.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ken, real quick before you leave, shout out where people can find you, your website, and that podcast you were mentioning before.
PBTX.com is our website, the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. Our podcast is The Bell Post, and our website is thebellpost.com. We have a blog that has where we highlight news stories about bail reform, and you can find all of our information on there.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank
you, everybody, for listening. Signs off, Cap. You go for it.
Doom Nation, thank you guys for listening once again. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And Ken, thank you for coming on. Adios, Doom Nation.
Good night.